In Willowbrook, a small town isolated by dense forests, life was quiet and predictable. During the day, its inhabitants were common workers, but at night, rumors began to circulate. And one rumor in particular always made the city tremble with apprehension: the Circus of Nightmares. The circus was an annual tradition that brought excitement and wonder to Willowbrook. Colorful tents were set up on the outskirts of the city, and the inhabitants eagerly awaited the arrival of the circus each year. There were impressive contortionists, funny clowns, and even exotic animals. However, what made Nightmare Circus truly special were the stories that surrounded it. It was said that the circus had a dark side, a nighttime spectacle that took place away from the public eye. Scary stories circulated around the city, whispered by candlelight on dark nights. There was talk of ghost trapeze artists who defied death, demonic acrobats who made dark pacts, and a sinister master of ceremonies with eyes as cold as the night. Emma, a curious 22-year-old girl, had always heard these stories, but had never believed them. She loved the circus since she was a child and couldn't wait for the day the show came to town. Emma worked at a local store, and her life was quite ordinary until a mysterious customer changed everything. It was a cloudy afternoon when the mysterious man entered the store. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that partially shaded his face and a dark cape that gave an air of mystery. His eyes were as deep as the night. The man approached Emma with silent steps, and a shiver ran down her spine as he whispered, "Do you want a unique experience beyond what is shown in the show?" Emma's heart quickened, and she looked warily around the store, as if she expected someone to watch her. She didn't know why, but she felt that this conversation was one that should not be heard by others. "What do you mean?" she whispered back, her curiosity overcoming her caution. The man held out an old-fashioned paper invitation with elegant letters that said, "Circus of Nightmares Night Special." His voice was soft and cryptic as he continued, "This is your only chance. Be in the main tent at midnight." Without waiting for a response, the man turned and left the store, leaving Emma stunned and full of doubts. She looked at the invitation in her hands, feeling a sense of deep uneasiness. That night, as the stars twinkled in the sky and the city was plunged into stillness, Emma found herself in her home, holding the invitation in trembling hands. The clock was approaching midnight, and her mind was full of questions. She was about to do something she knew was foolish, but curiosity got the best of her. It was an invitation into the unknown, into the dark side of the Nightmare Circus, and Emma was about to cross the line between reality and imagination. She knew she was about to enter a world of mystery and fear, but she was determined to find out what really happened in the circus's secret nights. The night was pitch black when Emma arrived at the Nightmare Circus's main tent. The starry sky was covered by dark clouds, casting an ominous atmosphere over the place. She felt a shiver run down her spine and wondered if she had made the right decision. The tent was deserted, with no sign of life except for a single dim light that illuminated the arena in the center. The surroundings were eerily silent, and Emma could only hear the sound of the wind whispering through the nearby trees. She hesitated at the entrance to the tent for a moment, looking at the lone light in the arena. Then, with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, she took a step forward. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, Emma began to make out a lone figure in the center of the ring. He was a tall man, dressed completely in black, with a top hat that partially hid his face. He was motionless, like a shadowy statue. A strange, mesmerizing song began to echo in the tent, filling the air with a chilling melody. The man began to move gracefully, dancing with a sinister elegance. Her silhouette seemed to dance between light and dark, creating a hypnotic sensation that captivated Emma's senses. The illusionist tricks began, defying logic and reality. Letters floated in the air, objects disappeared and reappeared before his eyes, and flames danced at the man's command. Each trick was more obscure and enigmatic than the last, leaving Emma perplexed and fascinated. As the show continued, she began to notice something even stranger. The other spectators, who had also received the mysterious invitation, were completely still, their eyes fixed on the man in the ring as if they were hypnotized. Emma looked at her. Around, a feeling of isolation invading her. She was the only one who seemed to be aware of the strangeness of the situation. The spectacle was hypnotic and disturbing. and she began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake in accepting the invitation. The man in the ring continued to perform increasingly dark tricks, and Emma felt like she was being sucked into a world of nightmares. The mesmerizing music filled her mind, making every thought a struggle. As the sinister spectacle reached its climax, the man in the ring looked directly at Emma. His eyes glowed with a menacing light, and a crooked smile formed on her lips. With a wave of his hand, he turned off all the lights in the tent, plunging it into total darkness. Emma's heart beat wildly as she found herself submerged in darkness, trapped in a place where reality and imagination mixed in disturbing ways. In the pitch black of the Circus of Nightmares main tent, Emma was plunged into oppressive darkness. Her heart was beating so loudly that it seemed to echo in her ears. She fought to stay calm, knowing she needed to find a way out of there. The sinister laughter of the other spectators, still motionless and mesmerized, seemed to echo in her mind like a cacophony of nightmares. Emma knew she couldn't trust anyone there. She began to move carefully, feeling the ground for a path. As she crept through the dark, Emma could feel a strange sensation in the air around her. It felt like something was changing, something she couldn't fully understand. The walls of the tent seemed to pulse and twitch, as if they were alive. As she continued her desperate search for a way out, Emma realized something even more disturbing. Her own shadow seemed to have a life of its own, moving independently of her. She looked down and saw that her shadow was stretching and twisting on the ground, taking on grotesque and frightening shapes. A scream escaped Emma's lips when she saw her shadow rise from the ground, taking the form of a dark and sinister creature. It was as if his own inner darkness came to life. The shadowy creature approached her, emitting unintelligible whispers that echoed in her mind. Desperate, Emma tried to retreat, but the shadowy creature caught up with her and enveloped her in its darkness. A sense of indescribable terror gripped her as she found herself entangled in the living shadows. Then, as if in response to a hidden command, the darkness dissipated, leaving Emma in a state of confusion and fear. She was back in the complete darkness of the tent, but now she was alone. The other spectators and the man in the ring had disappeared. Emma forced herself to continue her search for the exit. She moved carefully, trying to ignore what had just happened. Each step took her deeper into the darkness of the tent, and the feeling that something sinister was lurking never left her. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, her fingers touched the fabric of the tent. She had found the way out. With one last look at the darkness surrounding her, Emma pushed the fabric aside and walked out of the tent, leaving behind the nightmare she had experienced. She was back out in the open, in the same spot where she had entered, but the circus, which now looked abandoned and decaying, had completely disappeared. The night wind whispered in the trees around him, as if nature itself regretted what had happened. Emma was terrified and confused, but determined to return home and put the terrifying experience behind her. She looked back one last time, seeing the tents disappear into the darkness of the night. As she walked back to Willowbrook, she knew that her memories of that frightening night would stay with her forever. She had witnessed the inexplicable and the terrifying, learning the darkest of ways that the nightmare circus held secrets that defied human understanding. The days following the experience at the Circus of Nightmares were dark for Emma. She couldn't get her mind off the terrifying events she had witnessed. The vivid shadows, the oppressive darkness, and the feeling that something sinister had followed her haunted her thoughts constantly. She tried to share her story with the inhabitants of Willowbrook, but no one seemed to believe her. To others, the Circus of Nightmares was just a fun and harmless nighttime spectacle. No one could understand the horror Emma had faced. As time passed, Emma felt increasingly isolated and troubled. She began to have terrible nightmares every night, in which living shadows surrounded her and pulled her into the abyss. Her sleep became a torturous experience, and she woke up every morning with a racing heart and the feeling that something was wrong. One night, while she was sitting in her dark room, Emma heard a soft whisper coming from the darkness. It was a voice she recognized immediately, the voice of the circus man. He was whispering her name, calling her into the darkness. Emma's heart raced, and she stood up in a panic, turning on all the lights in the room. But the voice persisted, whispering in his mind like a poisonous snake. She couldn't escape it. Determined to face her fears once and for all, Emma took out the Nightmare Circus invitation that she kept as a souvenir. She stared at him for a moment, then, with fierce determination, tore the paper into pieces. The whispers stopped instantly, and momentary relief washed over her. She hoped this would be the end of her torments, but she was wrong. That night, the nightmares intensified. The living shadows pulled her into a world of even deeper darkness, where the circus man awaited her. He stood before her, his eyes shining with insatiable desire. "Did you think you could escape us?" he whispered, his voice echoing in your mind. Emma tried to back away, but she was cornered. The living shadows held her tightly, preventing any escape. She felt helpless in the face of the dark power that surrounded her. Then something inside her lit up. A flame of courage and determination burned in her chest. She refused to fall victim to her own terrifying memories. With a cry of defiance, she faced the circus man. The living shadows retreated, as if fearful of Emma's newfound strength. The circus man stepped back, his eyes flashing with surprise and anger. Emma was no longer under his control. With a supreme effort, Emma managed to wake up from the nightmare. She was back in her room, her heart racing and sweat covering her body. But this time, she knew she had found the courage to face her fears. In the days that followed, Emma dedicated herself to overcoming the trauma that haunted her. She sought help and found support from friends and family. Gradually, the nightmares subsided, and the living shadows disappeared from her life. Emma never heard from the Nightmare Circus again, and the town of Willowbrook returned to its peaceful routine. She learned to value the light and courage that resided within her, even in her darkest moments. But every now and then, when the night was dark and silent, Emma could feel the presence of living shadows lurking in the shadows, reminding her that not all nightmares are easily forgotten.